Do you know what's strange about history? Sometimes, the greatest conqueror doesn't wear armor, doesn't hold a sword, and doesn't even make a sound. It just breathes. It hides inside a cough, a handshake, a whisper of air, and before anyone realizes it, it's already won. When we think of the conquest of the New World, we imagine soldiers, steel, and blood. But what if I told you, before the Spanish fired a single shot, before the first city was burned, an invisible army had already landed? And it wasn't carrying flags. It carried smallpox. They didn't even know it was there. On one of those ships sailing from Spain to the Caribbean, hidden among the sailors, sleeping quietly in the lungs of one man, was something that would wipe out almost an entire world. And no one, not even the most powerful kings of Europe, could see it coming. Imagine being one of the native people of the New Worlds back then, living your ordinary life, tending to your crops, building temples that touched the sky. You've never seen a man in steel before, never heard of horses, never tasted wine. Your world is full of gods, spirits, and balance. And then one day, strange men arrive on floating mountains, bringing gifts and death. At first, there's curiosity. The locals greet them, feed them, offer gifts of gold. They don't know these men have been traveling for months across oceans, living in cramped quarters, coughing, sweating, bleeding. And inside their bodies is a passenger, smallpox, a virus that has already haunted Europe for centuries. Within days of contact, the fever begins. The first native who falls sick thinks it's nothing unusual. Maybe the gods are angry. But soon the sickness spreads. The fever rises higher and higher. The skin burns. Red spots appear, small at first, like seeds under the flesh. Then they swell, bursting, leaving behind scars and screams. Families watch helplessly as the people they love start to melt away in front of them. No one understands what's happening. The priests pray harder. The shamans burn herbs. The people make offerings to their gods, but nothing stops it. Because how do you fight something you cannot see? How do you battle a ghost carried in the breath of strangers? It's hard to even comprehend the speed. Smallpox spread faster than the ships themselves. It moved through trade routes, through markets, through touch and air. There are records suggesting that entire villages vanished before Europeans even reached them. Imagine that, dying from a war you never fought. It's chilling when you realize that this wasn't even intentional at first. The Spanish didn't understand viruses. They didn't know what smallpox was beyond a disease. To them, it was fate, or worse, divine intervention. They believed God had blessed their conquest. They saw dying natives and thought, the Lord is clearing the land for us. But what kind of God clears the land with pain like that? You know what makes this story even darker? Smallpox wasn't just killing people, it was killing civilizations. It tore apart entire belief systems. The Aztecs, the Incas, the tribes of the Caribbean, they all had myths of balance, life, and divine order. And suddenly, that order shattered. When smallpox struck, people began to question everything. Had their gods abandoned them? Were these pale strangers gods themselves? Or demons? That doubt was more dangerous than any weapon. When the Spanish marched inland, they found towns already emptied, fields untended, corpses piled beside temples. Some soldiers wrote in their diaries that it felt as if the land itself had surrendered before they arrived. We did not conquer them. They were already dead. And that's where the story turns haunting, because this wasn't just death, it was transformation. Smallpox didn't just change who lived and died, it rewrote destiny. Before 1492, The Americas were full of thriving civilizations, millions of people, cities that rivaled anything in Europe. Within a century, smallpox had reduced those numbers by up to 90%. 90%. Try to imagine that. Imagine walking through a city where every 10th person you see is alive and the rest, gone. And then think about what that did to the survivors, the mothers who buried all their children, the priests whose prayers went unanswered, the warriors who had no one left to protect. Can you picture that silence? The kind of silence that follows when there are no more songs, no more festivals, just the wind moving through empty homes. It's said that in some regions the smell of death lingered for months. Travelers wrote that they could smell the villages long before they saw them. Entire generations vanished. Stories, languages, bloodlines, all erased by something so small you couldn't see it under a microscope back then. Sometimes I wonder if the smallpox knew what it was doing. Of course not. It wasn't alive in the way we are, but in its blind hunger to survive, it destroyed an entire world and gave birth to another. The Spanish called it fate. Historians called it epidemiology, but maybe it was just chaos. And here's the cruel twist. The virus didn't stop there. It mutated, spread across islands, reached the mainland, crossed mountains. People who'd never seen Europeans were dying of European diseases. It was like a whisper carried by the wind. They are coming. The irony is that back in Europe, smallpox was considered normal. Children caught it and either lived or died. Survivors bore scars but gained immunity. But in the Americas, no one had ever faced it. No resistance, no memory, no antibodies. Just terror. Think about that imbalance. One side carrying invisible armor, the other completely naked to the unseen. It wasn't a fair fight. It never was. And yet, in that darkness, there were moments of human tragedy that make the story even more personal. There are accounts of Spanish priests weeping because they could do nothing to save the converts dying in their arms, indigenous healers trying to cover bodies with mud to cool fever, families isolating the sick in huts, unknowingly inventing the idea of quarantine, only to find themselves infected anyway. And when the Spanish realized what was happening, some began to weaponize it. There are later records during wars with tribes where infected blankets were given intentionally, gifts that carry death. Can you imagine what that means? To turn disease into a weapon, to hand someone a blanket, knowing it will kill them. That's not conquest. That's extermination by silence. But what's strange and almost poetic is how something so horrifying shaped our modern world. The depopulation of the Americas opened land for colonization. Whole ecosystems changed. Forests grew back where cities once stood. The world map as we know it today was redrawn by a virus. Even centuries later, smallpox continued to haunt humanity. It became one of the first diseases humans tried to fight with science. The first vaccine ever made, by Edward Jenner, was born from this very nightmare. It's almost like humanity spent centuries trying to atone for what smallpox had done. Still, I can't help but ask, if the virus had never come, what would the world look like now? Would the Aztecs and Incas still stand? Would history have written different heroes, different gods, different destinies? Maybe. Or maybe another shadow would have come instead. Because that's the story of us, isn't it? We build, we explore, we conquer, and sometimes we bring our own destruction with us. So the next time you hear about the great explorers, the brave conquests, the discovery of the new world, remember that before the gunfire, before the gold, there was a cough. One cough that changed everything. And that's the thing about invisible invaders. You never see them coming until it's already too late.